Today we're going to look at factoring by grouping. And as we think about factoring by grouping, we want to realize that really all that is doing the greatest common factor 3 times. So what we're talking about is, as we look at the polynomial in our first example, we're going to identify which 2 terms have something in common, and there might be multiple of them, but today we're going to use those first 2 terms. They definitely have something in common. For instance, they're both even numbers. They both have an x. Okay, so we know we can take out something. So in those 2 terms, let's use our greatest common factor principles. Well, I know 6xy can be broken into 6 times xy, and xy can further be broken down into x times y. 6 can be broken down into 2 times 3. Now I want to use my second term and break it down as far as it can go also. Well, 10x breaks down into 10 times x, and 10 is 2 times 5. Once I have these things broken down as far as they go, I want to pull out the greatest common factor. So you'll notice that first, our first term is 2 times 3 times x times y. Our second term is 2 times 5 times x. Okay. As we look at our second grouping, our 9y and our 15, the things that they have in common, well, we can break down 9y into 3 times y, and we can write that down here, 3 times y. And then 15 can be broken down into 3 times 5, so plus 3 times 5. We start figuring out what things we have in common in our red terms. So they both have a 2. And do they have anything else in common? Sure. They both have an x. Let's go ahead and pull out that common factor. What we have left are the things that are uncircled in both pieces. So we have left a 3y and a plus 5. Now we need to do the same thing on our blue side. So 3 times y and 3 times 5 share 3's. We can pull out that 3, and I'm left with, on the left, 3 times y plus a 5. Okay. Now we have 2 new terms. Two terms at the bottom here. 2x times 3y plus 5 is really just one term. 3 times 3y plus 5 is really just one term. So now we can add those together, and we see we had our first greatest common factor in red, we had our second greatest common factor in blue, and then our third greatest common factor was here in white. Well, let's try and break that up a third time using our greatest common factor principles. So we've got 2x times 3y plus 5 and 3 times 3y plus 5. Okay, well, what things do these 2 terms have in common? It's usually going to be everything in parentheses. So both of these terms have a 3y plus 5. Let's pull that out. And once we pull that out, we're going to write in a second set of parentheses what's left. So on the left we have 2x, and on the right we have plus 3. This is our completely factored expression. We factored this by grouping. Now I want you to go ahead and try this. And I would like you to do the polynomial 12xy plus 18x plus 2y plus 3. Again, your task is to factor this by grouping. Okay. Right now I would like for you to pause the video until you have completed this problem. Again, pause the video until you've completed this problem. Alright, since you've restarted the video, I would like to show you that the answer is 6x plus 1 times 2y plus 3. 6x plus 1 times 2y plus 3. If you made a mistake or you're not quite sure how that answer could come from this expression, I would like for you to ask your teacher for help. Okay, so now let's find the mistake. We're going to look at a completely factored polynomial, and I'm going to go through the whole process. We're going to factor by grouping, and one mistake is going to be made. I want you to find it. Okay, so our polynomial is x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x plus 6. I can break down x cubed into 3x's. Okay, 2x squared is also pretty easy to break down. That's 2 times x squared, which is 2x's. Our third term is 3 times x. That's pretty easy to break down also. And our last term is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. Okay. Well, I want to find everything that the first two terms have in common. Sure enough, they have 2 x's each. Now the first term again has more than 2 x's, but I can only pull out 2 of them because the second term just has 2. So I can pull out an x squared. I'm left with an x on the left term, and I'm left with a 2 in that right term for those two. Our 3x, well, our 3x and our 6 both have a 3, so let's go ahead and pull out a 3. I'm left with an x, and I'm left with a 2. I have now two new expressions, both my inside parentheses are x minus 2, and between them I have a plus sign. So now when I pull out the next common factor, that's x minus 2, I get x minus 2 times what's left, x squared plus 3. Okay. I made one mistake, so if you have to rewatch the process, try and figure out what the mistake is. If you're not sure, please ask your teacher. What's the mistake?